Thank you. I'm so excited to be back here. My question has to do with resistance versus fear, I guess I want to say.
Fear's the indication of resistance.
Yes, but when is fear a sign that this is not a good move?
Always.
But it could also be, I'm not good enough for this. Or it could also be, I can't afford it. Or, I'm resisting it from a...
Well, when you ask the question, when is something a good idea? What do you mean?
Well, say, I want to...
But what do you mean?
A new job, okay.
But just stay with us for a second on that. When does fear mean that something is not a good idea? And by that, we mean, when you feel fear, it means don't continue to move in the direction of what is causing the fear. So sometimes it's an action, sometimes it's a thought, but in any case, moving in the direction of it and increasing the fear is detrimental to your experience. And so it means that you've introduced, maybe by focusing on some reality, maybe there is a monster in the bushes, or maybe by conjuring something that is just ultimately not helpful for you, but the answer is still the same. When you feel negative emotion, stop. Make a new plan. Esther's favorite story with Jerry, relative to fear, he was for a while an actor, many years ago, riding a horse in Arizona, doing lines, and the wrangler presented to him a very rowdy horse. The horse was clearly uncomfortable, and Jerry refused it. And the wrangler said, "You're afraid of that horse." And Jerry said, "No, I'm not," but he was. He felt strong apprehension about getting on that horse. So the wrangler jumped up on the horse to prove how foolish Jerry was, and the horse reared its head back and knocked out all of his teeth. And so sometimes that feeling of fear is letting you know that if you proceed down this path while you're feeling this way, that an exaggerated, because law of attraction is always bringing you more. So if you're moving towards something that makes you feel fear, isn't it logical that if you keep moving toward it, that it's going to get bigger? So whether it's a thought or an action, the response, if we were standing in your physical shoes, would be the same. Stand still, reevaluate. And of course, we want to say to you, think about what you do want, and that's a harder thing. In other words, usually by the time you've brought yourself into some fearful place, there's quite a bit of momentum that's already been going there. And so you're not going to turn it around on a dime. Right. But we know what you mean. If you feel uncomfortable about something, don't continue to move forward. About how often do you do that? Have you ever been feeling pretty good and a friend calls and your friend complains about something and you feel the discord? And if you were really paying attention to your guidance and responding in the way your inner being within you would withdraw from that. You certainly wouldn't continue the words. You wouldn't contribute your conversation about it, but you often do because you don't want to be unkind or you don't want to seem not sympathetic. And so you proceed even though it felt uncomfortable. This is the way you develop those patterns. And before you know it, you've got that friend calling you on a regular basis. That friend is venting to you and you're easy to vent to because you're taking it and you're responding. You're there for them, you see.
All right.
So then your question is, well, it's really equally uncomfortable for me, Abraham, to move forward with that thought or to not. In other words, to not move forward with my friend who wants to talk about this, or to just say, I'm too busy and hang up, are equally uncomfortable. And we say, that's never true. It's never equally uncomfortable. There is a choice that feels better than the other. But we will acknowledge that sometimes there's momentum that's carrying you. In other words, if you woke up that morning and you were complaining, it's logical that you would receive a complaining conversation from someone else. So you started the momentum before you even answered the telephone. You started the momentum. It's a perfect vibrational match. You just have to decide at what point are you going to change the direction of the energy that you're flowing. And if you're waiting until there's a lot of momentum, then the conversation really isn't a very satisfying conversation, because when momentum's really strong, there isn't enough action to stop it. It just sort of has to peter out. Well, what would cause momentum to peter out? Lack of attention to it. Thankfully, you eventually go to sleep and you withdraw your attention from it. That really is the greatest benefit that your slumber gives you. It gives you a break from your negative momentum. You see?
Could you turn that around by focusing on your friend and you want them to be happy and want them to work through with all that stuff?
Of course you can. Yeah. And that all of those decisions depend upon how much momentum you've got going on. In other words, sometimes you can have a really good friend who's really determined to focus negatively on something. And everything you say in an attempt to help them feel better just makes them dig in harder and stronger and defend their limitedness that much more. And at some point, you have to decide where your benefit to them ends and where your detriment to yourself begins. In other words, if you're standing in a really stable place, then you could feel comfortable under all conditions. If you know your ability to bring someone around, if you're standing in a stable place, you can take quite a bit of complaining without it taking its toll on you. And you can continue to point out something that is beneficial. We have those experiences with people all of the time. Esther has some friends that she knows that she is of advantage to because she can listen with some understanding and keep pointing it in the right direction. But eventually, if it doesn't turn around, there's no point in going any further, you see. You just have to decide. And the universe will continue to bring you a pretty good representation of where you are vibrationally. If the people who are coming around you are mostly feeling good, that's a really good indication of where you are. And if they're not, then that's a really good indication of where you are.
Yeah.
Whatever comes is a really good indication of where you are.
Good. I have another question.
Yeah. Did we satisfy that one?
I think so.
Just speak your first question again.
Okay. What is the difference between fear and resistance?
Fear is the indication of resistance, and then you said...
But what about...
Can't even find it now, can you?
I can't.
You can't even find it now.
There's this thing out here that I created. I'm going to say a new job. But is my fear telling me I shouldn't take that job, or is it a fear that says you're not good enough?
Play it out in your mind. Say to yourself, I'm not going to take that job. Then what happens to the fear? Does it get bigger or does it get less? If it gets bigger, then it's worse not to take the job than it is to take the job.
Okay.
But if it gives you a strong, strong feeling of relief, then,
right.
In other words, your guidance is letting you know. Your guidance is always letting you know. But you have to deliberately think a thought and deliberately feel about what the emotional response to the thought is. And you have to do that pretty regularly before you can really think fast on your feet. And fortunately, most decisions aren't demanded of you right now. In other words, it sounds like you've already taken the job. So to decide to quit it is a decision that you don't have to make right now. You could give it a little bit of time, you see.
I see. Okay. I think I got that.
When we tell you that you have guidance, you want the same sort of guidance that you thought you wanted from your mother at first. Should I do this or should I do this? And when your mother said, do that, you said, Mom, I don't want to do that. And she said, well, you asked me what I thought. Yeah, but I didn't want your opinion. I wanted your agreement. I wanted you to agree with me, you see. Yeah. And what you really want is the agreement of Source. And you can just keep asking the questions until you can discover what the agreement of Source is about this. And really, what Source would like to say to you about that job, that hypothetical job, is just jump in. Just jump in. You can make anything work or you can make anything fail. It's your choice. You can be happy about something or you can be miserable about something. It's your choice. You can make the best of it or you can make the worst of it. There are no really bad turns. You could be born in Afghanistan and it would be all right. There are no wrong turns. There are no wrong decisions. Wherever you are is where you are. And from there, you are making your next decision and your next 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 and your next, you see. Don't ask your guidance to, in this moment, give you a definitive yes or no, right or wrong. Just keep leaning in the direction of what feels better and better. And before you know it, that's the momentum that you'll have, and things will just be working out for you in a very obvious way all of the time. Yeah.
Got that. Okay, thank you. My other question is, somewhere along the way in the last 10 years, I've developed allergies that I've never had. So I've somehow drawn these to me. And, and I find myself saying, oh, well, I'm allergic to this or I'm allergic to that. But I think about it and saying, well, I want to turn the words around so that, or move, to like getting rid of them.
We always really appreciate when the person comes to the hot seat with 2 or 3 or 4 questions, because they almost always are about the same thing. And so we just encouraged you relative to emotion to sniff around until you find the best path. And we're encouraging you that relative to allergies too. Sniff around. Sniff around. Well, that makes it worse. Oh, not so bad there. Sniff around. Sniff around. It's the same thing, isn't it? Until eventually you will have sniffed your way vibrationally into such a good feeling place that you will be able to control the environment around you, or better said, your response to the environment around you. Really much better said. You don't ever want to control the environment around you. You want to control your response. This is brilliant, to the environment around you. You want to control your response to the environment around you. You don't need to ask everybody to be perfect. You just care about your response to their perfection or their imperfection. And the same is true of this other, you see. There are all kinds of things around you that have the potential of bothering you or not. You have to prepare yourself to not be bothered, you see, until eventually you can stand strong wherever you are, following impulses. And then there's always someone in the far back of the room that says, well, then can I drink chlorine bleach? And we say, give it a try. Let us know how it works out. And if it doesn't work out well, then don't do it again.
Well, I never thought of applying that same thinking, about sniffing around to something.
To everything.
Yeah.
To everything.
Yeah.
Sniff your way around.
So it's really not about sniffing about allergies, but sniffing for something that feels good.
Yeah.
Okay.
In other words, in the same way that a hateful thought gives you an indication that lets you know you're on the wrong path, when you have a reaction to something, it's an indication that you're on the wrong path. The difference is with something like an allergy, where you're trying to avoid this food, or you're trying to avoid this windstorm, or you're trying to avoid this fragrance from this flower. The difference is that we want you to take it all to a vibrational level, because everything is vibrational. And people discover all the time that when they get to the bottom of what's really bothering them, the symptoms of other things bothering them go away, because it was never about the other. That thing that you were allergic to was just the path of least resistance to show you about your vibrational offness. So you're sneezing, someone says, are you allergic to something? And you say, yes. Negative thoughts. Yeah. And they will say, no, really, are you allergic to something? You say, well, I seem to be allergic to this thing that's making me sneeze, but I suspect that it's deeper than that. And rather than trying to put myself into a bubble where there is nothing that could possibly affect me in the wrong way, I'm not going to live conditional life anymore. I'm going to find my stability, and I'm going to get my wheel moving at such a high pace that anything that isn't a vibrational match to it bounces off of it. Yeah. I'm living in a sneeze-free zone. Or whatever. Good, really good.
Thank you very much.
Sure.